Claire sat in her Paris apartment, a travel brochure open on the table, its glossy pages glowing with images of Florence's golden sunsets and Rome's ancient ruins. Her heart raced. She could almost feel the warmth of the Italian sun, hear the chatter of bustling piazzas. But then her eyes drifted to her laptop, where a spreadsheet tracked every euro in their savings account. Not yet, it whispered. Not safe. At 40, Claire had saved enough for a lifetime of security, a house, retirement, emergencies. But as she closed the brochure, a hollow ache settled in her chest. She'd spent years building a fortress of wealth, yet her life felt poorer than ever. What was she saving for, if not to live? In that quiet moment, she saw the truth. Her obsession with saving was costing her the joy she thought she was protecting. In their modest apartment in Paris's 11th arrondissement, Claire and her husband, Thomas, sat across from each other at a worn oak kitchen table. It was their 10th wedding anniversary, a milestone that once filled them with dreams of celebration. Thomas, his eyes bright with anticipation, slid a small envelope across the table. "Happy anniversary," he said softly, a boyish grin spreading across his face. Inside were 2 plane tickets to Italy, a 7-day trip to Florence and Rome, a dream they'd shared since their honeymoon, when they'd promised to explore the world together. Claire's breath caught. She traced her finger over the tickets, her mind flashing to images of Renaissance art, cobblestone streets, and candlelit dinners by the Arno River. For a fleeting moment, she was 28 again, laughing with Thomas over cheap wine, planning adventures they'd take someday. But then her gaze hardened. She pushed the tickets back toward him, her voice sharp. "We can't afford this, Thomas. You know we need to save, for the mortgage, for retirement, for emergencies. This is reckless." Thomas's grin faded. His shoulders slumped, and the light in his eyes dimmed, replaced by a quiet hurt that cut deeper than any argument. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the tickets as if they were a dream he'd been foolish to believe in. "What future, Claire?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "We're living it right now, aren't we? Or are we just waiting for a day that never comes?" The words landed like a stone in Claire's chest. She wanted to argue, to list the reasons why saving was the responsible choice. Interest rates, market volatility, the unpredictability of life. But as she looked at Thomas, she saw something she hadn't noticed before. The lines around his eyes, deeper than they'd been a year ago. The way his hands fidgeted, as if holding back a decade of unspoken longing. This wasn't just about the tickets. It was about the life they'd stopped living, the dreams they'd buried under the weight of her fear. Claire's mind raced back to her childhood in a small French town, where her parents fought over every unpaid bill. She remembered the nights she went to bed hungry, the shame of wearing hand-me-downs to school. That fear of scarcity had followed her into adulthood, shaping every decision. She'd built a life of security with Thomas, savings accounts, investments, a detailed budget, but at what cost? The kitchen table, once a place for laughter and shared meals, had become a battleground for her calculations. In that moment, Thomas's question echoed in her mind. What future? She saw herself reflected in his eyes, not as the strong, prudent woman she thought she was, but as someone trapped by her own fear, hoarding not just money but moments, love, joy. The tickets lay between them, a symbol of everything she'd denied them both. Her throat tightened, and tears pricked her eyes. She'd spent years saving for a life she was too afraid to live. The realization hit her like a wave. Her obsession with saving wasn't protecting their future, it was stealing their present. Why do we cling so tightly to the future that we lose the present? In the ancient Buddhist tale of the miserly merchant, a man spent his life amassing gold, hiding it beneath the floorboards of his home. He checked it daily, terrified of theft, but never spent a single coin. When he died, his gold remained untouched, his life unfulfilled. The villagers who found it wept, not for him, but for the joy he never knew. Like the merchant, Claire had built her life around saving. Every euro, every moment, believing it would shield her from the uncertainty of tomorrow. But in her pursuit of security, she'd lost the warmth of today, the laughter of shared dreams, the connection with the man sitting across from her. The Buddha taught that impermanence governs all things. Money comes and goes, plans shift, even love fades if not nurtured. Claire's fear of scarcity wasn't just about money. It was about control, about resisting the truth that nothing can be held forever. The Four Noble Truths tell us that suffering, dukkha, arises from tanha, craving. In Claire's case, the craving for certainty in an uncertain world. By hoarding her resources, she wasn't preparing for the future. She was imprisoning her present, locking away the very joy she thought she was safeguarding. This isn't a new story. In every city, in every middle-class home, people like Claire wrestle with the same tension, the pull between security and living fully. In Paris, where the cost of living climbs and the future feels uncertain, the middle class often clings to savings as a lifeline. But the Buddhist teachings remind us that true security lies not in accumulation, but in letting go of fear, of control, of the illusion that tomorrow can be owned. Claire didn't know it yet, but that moment at the kitchen table was the beginning of her awakening. Her silence after Thomas's question wasn't defeat. It was the first crack in the wall she'd built around her heart. What happens when we stop postponing joy for a future that may never arrive? The ancient Zen story of the two monks and the muddy road offers a clue. One monk carried a woman across a muddy path, breaking his vow, while the other fumed for hours, unable to let go of the transgression. The first monk moved on, unburdened. The second carried the mud in his mind. Claire, like the second monk, had been carrying her fear of scarcity for years, letting it taint every decision, every moment of potential happiness. But in Thomas's quiet question, she heard an invitation to set it down. Stay with me, because Claire's story isn't just about a pair of plane tickets or a savings account. It's about the moment she saw what she was truly losing, not money, but the life she was meant to live. It's about how she learned to loosen her grip, not just on her wallet, but on the fear that had defined her for so long. The real journey begins not in Florence's sunlit streets, but in the quiet space where Claire began to see herself clearly. The middle class in cities like Paris lives in a delicate balance, where every expense feels like a gamble against an uncertain future. Claire's story mirrors countless others, professionals who work tirelessly, save diligently, yet feel an emptiness they can't name. The Buddha's teaching of dukkha, suffering born of craving, explains this. Claire craved security, but her attachment to it created a cycle of fear and deprivation. She wasn't just saving money. She was saving herself from vulnerability, from the raw uncertainty of life. Yet, as the three Dharma seals teach, clinging to permanence in an impermanent world only deepens suffering. Thomas's question, "What future, Claire?" wasn't just a challenge, it was a mirror. It forced Claire to confront the cost of her choices. Not the financial cost, but the human one. The evenings they didn't laugh, the trips they didn't take, the love they didn't express. The Buddha said, "The root of suffering is attachment." Claire's attachment wasn't to money itself, but to the story she told herself about what money could prevent. What if joy isn't something to save for, but something to live now? Claire's awakening began in that moment of silence, when she saw not just Thomas's hurt, but her own. The path forward wasn't about spending recklessly. It was about loosening her grip on fear, about trusting that life could be lived, not just planned. Stay with me, because the heart of this story lies not in what Claire saved, but in what she learned to let go. Claire and Thomas had built what many in Paris would call a good life. Their apartment in the 11th arrondissement was modest but comfortable, with a view of the city's rooftops and a small balcony where they'd once sipped coffee and dreamed aloud. Claire, a financial analyst, was meticulous, her spreadsheets a testament to her discipline. Thomas, a high school history teacher, brought warmth to their home, his stories of ancient civilizations filling their evenings with wonder. They'd met at a university book club, bonding over Italo Calvino's Invisible Cities and a shared dream of traveling the world. Florence's Uffizi Gallery, Kyoto's temples, Machu Picchu's misty peaks. Those dreams were vivid in their 20s, when life felt like an open road. But Claire's childhood cast a long shadow. Growing up in a small town outside Lyon, she'd known scarcity. Her parents, a factory worker and a seamstress, struggled to pay bills. Claire remembered nights when the electricity was cut, the shame of wearing patched clothes to school, the arguments that echoed through thin walls. At 15, she vowed never to live that way again. She studied hard, earned a scholarship, and built a career that promised stability. When she met Thomas, his easygoing nature balanced her intensity. He didn't mind her frugality at first. It seemed practical, even admirable. As the years passed, Claire's fear of scarcity hardened into a way of life. Every paycheck was divided. 60% to savings, 30% to bills, 10% for necessities. Vacations were unnecessary, dining out a luxury. Thomas tried to soften her edges, suggesting weekend getaways or small indulgences, a new dress, a concert ticket. But Claire always had a reason to say no. The stock market was shaky, interest rates were rising, they needed a bigger emergency fund. Their savings grew, but so did the distance between them. Thomas stopped suggesting outings. Claire stopped noticing his silence. By their 10th anniversary, their bank account held enough for a down payment on a larger apartment, early retirement, or any crisis. Claire felt a quiet pride in this, but also a gnawing anxiety. What if they lost it all? What if a recession hit? Her spreadsheets became her refuge, a fortress against the unpredictability of life. Thomas, meanwhile, felt like a passenger in their marriage. He missed the woman who'd once laughed at his terrible Italian accent as they planned their dream trip to Rome. The anniversary dinner was Thomas's attempt to reclaim that spark. For months, he'd saved small amounts from his modest teacher's salary, hiding it from Claire's eagle-eyed budgeting. He'd researched Italy meticulously, affordable guest houses, free walking tours, budget-friendly trattorias. When he presented the tickets, his heart was full, expecting Claire's eyes to light up as they once did. But her reaction was a blade. "We can't afford this," she said, her voice clipped. She listed the risks, the mortgage payments, their retirement goals, the what-ifs that haunted her. Thomas's face crumpled. He didn't argue, but his question, "What future, Claire?" "We're living it now," carried a decade of unspoken longing. That night, Claire couldn't sleep. She sat in the dark, the travel brochure in her hands. She flipped through its pages, each image a reminder of the dreams she'd deferred. She thought of her parents, their fights over money, and realized she'd inherited more than their thrift. She'd inherited their fear. She saw Thomas's face at dinner, not angry but defeated, and it broke her. For the first time, she asked herself, "What am I saving for? A life without him? Without us?" The next morning, Claire found Thomas in the kitchen, staring out the window. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "I've been so afraid of losing what we have that I've lost what matters most." They talked for hours, about her childhood fears, his longing for connection, their forgotten dreams. Claire admitted she'd turned their life into a ledger, measuring love by numbers. Thomas shared how he'd felt invisible, his efforts to please her overshadowed by her fear. Claire proposed a compromise. They'd take the Italy trip, but plan it carefully, affordable accommodations, simple meals. As they sat together, booking the tickets online, Claire felt something shift. It wasn't just about the trip. It was about choosing to live, not just to save. The spreadsheet was still there, but it no longer ruled her. She reached for Thomas's hand, and he squeezed it back. For the first time in years, they were building something together, not a bank balance, but a life. The Buddha's words in the Dhammapada resonate like a quiet bell through Claire's story. Do not dwell on the past. Do not dream of the future. Concentrate the mind on the present moment. Claire's life, meticulously planned and fiercely guarded, was a testament to her craving for control, a craving the Buddha called tanha, the root of all suffering, dukkha, as outlined in the Four Noble Truths. Her obsession with saving wasn't merely about money. It was about shielding herself from the vulnerability of her childhood, from the fear of scarcity that had shaped her. Yet, as the three Dharma seals teach, everything is impermanent. Money, plans, even the security we chase. By clinging to her savings, Claire wasn't building a fortress. She was erecting a prison, locking away not just her euros, but her capacity for joy, connection, and presence. Consider the ancient Buddhist tale of Kisa, a mother who lost her child and begged the Buddha to bring him back. The Buddha asked her to find a mustard seed from a home untouched by death. She searched tirelessly, only to discover that no such home existed. In her grief, she learned the truth of impermanent, that loss is universal, and clinging to what cannot be held only deepens suffering. Like Kisa, Claire was chasing an illusion, the belief that enough money could protect her from life's uncertainties. Her spreadsheets, her budgets, her endless calculations were her mustard seeds, tokens of a security that could never be guaranteed. The Four Noble Truths offer a path through this suffering. The first truth acknowledges dukkha, Claire's anxiety, her strained marriage, her deferred dreams. The second truth identifies the cause, tanha, her craving for control over an impermanent world. The third truth promises liberation. By letting go of this craving, Claire could find peace. And the fourth truth, the Noble Eightfold Path, provides the way forward. Right speech guided her apology to Thomas, not as a defense, but as an act of truth. Right mindfulness allowed her to see her fear for what it was, a story, not a reality. Claire's awakening wasn't about abandoning savings altogether. It was about shifting her intention. The Buddha taught that true wealth lies not in accumulation, but in generosity, in living with an open heart. In Paris, where the middle class navigates rising costs and economic uncertainty, this lesson is profound. How many of us, like Claire, hoard our resources, money, time, love, out of fear? How many of us miss the beauty of the present, waiting for a better moment that may never come? The Dhammapada also says, better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace. Claire's apology to Thomas was that word, not because it fixed everything, but because it was honest, vulnerable, and present. Her story challenges us to ask, what are we holding so tightly that it's costing us our joy? What mustard seeds are we chasing, believing they'll save us from life's impermanence? The Noble Eightfold Path offers a map for navigating the tension between security and living fully. For Claire, the path began with right mindfulness, the practice of observing her thoughts and fears without being consumed by them. Each time she said no to a trip, a dinner, or a moment of connection, she was reacting to a story from her childhood, a story of lack, of shame, of powerlessness. Mindfulness invited her to pause and ask, is this fear true now? It was a simple question, but it shifted her perspective. She began to notice how her anxiety about money wasn't just about numbers. It was about a deeper fear of losing control, of being vulnerable again. Try this. For 1 week, keep a journal of every moment you hesitate to spend, whether it's money on a small treat, time with a loved one, or energy on a dream. Each time, write down what you're afraid of losing. Is it security? Approval? The illusion of certainty? Then, ask yourself, what would happen if I let this fear go, just for this moment? This practice of right mindfulness isn't about reckless spending. It's about seeing clearly, about choosing with awareness rather than reacting out of habit. Right intention was Claire's next step. Her intention had been rooted in fear of scarcity, fear of failure. But the Buddha teaches that intentions should flow from wisdom, compassion, and renunciation. For Claire, this meant shifting from hoarding to generosity, not just with money, but with her presence. She began small, agreeing to the Italy trip, but planning it modestly. She set a budget, researched affordable options, and committed to enjoying the moment without letting fear dictate her choices. This wasn't about throwing caution to the wind. It was about choosing to live with an open heart. You can do this too. Choose one small act of generosity this week. A coffee shared with a friend, a day off to rest, a kind word to a colleague. Notice how it feels to give without expecting something in return. The Buddha taught that generosity, dana, is the foundation of a liberated mind. It's not about giving everything away. It's about loosening the grip of fear, letting the river of life flow. Right effort supported Claire's transformation. Letting go of old habits wasn't easy. Her instinct to save, to control, was deeply ingrained. But she practiced diligently, reminding herself daily to focus on the present. She started setting aside small amounts for living, a fund for experiences, not just emergencies. Each time she spent on a moment, a museum visit, a shared meal, she felt a flicker of freedom, a reminder that life was more than a balance sheet. Imagine a lotus blooming in muddy water, its petals untouched by the grime. That's the mind that chooses presence over fear, generosity over scarcity. Claire's path wasn't perfect, but it was a beginning, a commitment to live, not just to save. Claire and Thomas stepped off the plane in Florence, their bags light, but their hearts full. The trip wasn't the lavish adventure they'd once imagined in their 20s. They stayed in a modest guest house near the Ponte Vecchio, ate pasta in small trattorias, and walked for hours through the city's winding streets. But every moment felt alive. Claire stood in the Uffizi Gallery, tears welling as she gazed at Botticelli's Birth of Venus, not just for its beauty, but for the realization that she was here, living a dream she'd almost buried. Thomas, beside her, squeezed her hand, his smile warm and unguarded. For the first time in years, they were fully present with each other. The trip wasn't a cure-all. Their savings account still loomed in Claire's mind, and moments of anxiety crept in. When a meal cost more than planned, when she calculated the exchange rate. But she practiced right mindfulness, breathing through the fear, reminding herself that this moment was worth more than any number. Thomas, too, was healing. He'd carried his own pain, the loneliness of a marriage overshadowed by budgets. But in Italy, he rediscovered the woman he'd fallen in love with, the one who laughed freely and dreamed boldly. Back in Paris, Claire didn't abandon her frugality entirely. She still tracked their finances, but with a new perspective. She created a life fund, a small portion of their income dedicated to experiences, whether a weekend trip or a quiet dinner at home. She and Thomas began talking more, not just about money, but about what they wanted their life to mean. They set new goals, not just financial ones, but dreams of hiking in the Alps, learning Italian, hosting friends for homemade meals. Some fears never fully disappear. Claire still felt a twinge of worry when she checked their bank balance. But she learned to see it as a whisper, not a command. The Dhammapada teaches, as a water drop on a lotus leaf does not adhere, so the wise person does not cling to what is seen, heard, or sensed. Claire's healing wasn't about erasing her fear of scarcity. It was about choosing not to let it rule her. Their marriage, once strained by unspoken tensions, grew stronger, not because they had more money, but because they had more moments. Life, Claire realized, isn't about saving every penny. It's about spending time where it matters. Like a tree that bends with the wind, she learned to adapt, to trust that joy in the present could coexist with planning for the future. Her scars, of childhood poverty, of years spent hoarding, remained, but they were no longer wounds. They were marks of a life being lived. Claire's story is a mirror for anyone who's ever deferred a dream, waiting for the right moment. In the middle-class world of Paris, London, or New York, the pressure to save for a house, for retirement, for security is relentless. But what are we sacrificing in the name of that safety? A laugh with a loved one? A sunset we'll never see again? A conversation that could change everything? The Buddhist teaching of impermanence reminds us that no moment lasts forever. The money we save may grow, but the time we lose is gone. Claire learned this the hard way, through Thomas's quiet pain and her own tears over a travel brochure. Her awakening wasn't about abandoning responsibility. It was about balancing it with presence. She didn't need to spend everything. She needed to live something. What are you holding back, waiting for a perfect tomorrow? Is it a trip you've dreamed of? A conversation you've avoided? A passion you've shelved? Your story, like Claire's, begins when you dare to ask, what am I saving for, if not to live now? The answer may not be a grand gesture. It could be as simple as a walk with a friend, a moment of stillness, a choice to say yes to joy. The Sutra on the 8 Realizations of Great Beings says, the mind is always craving, but the wise understand that craving leads to suffering. Claire's journey invites us to look within, to see where our own cravings, for security, for control, have built walls around our hearts. What would it feel like to lower those walls, even just for a moment? Take a quiet moment today, perhaps with a cup of tea or a blank page, and reflect on what you've been saving for later. It might be a trip, a dream, a conversation, or even a feeling you've pushed aside. Write it down, not as a plan, but as an acknowledgement. Next to it, write one small step you can take now to bring it closer. A phone call, a saved date, a single act of presence. This isn't about spending recklessly. It's about living intentionally, about choosing the present over the illusion of a perfect future. If Claire's journey resonates with you, if you feel the pull to live more fully in this moment, subscribe to continue this path with us. Each video is a mirror, reflecting the truths we often avoid. It's not about having all the answers. It's about daring to ask the questions. When you're ready to let go, to live, we'll be here, walking this journey together.